Now we look at the experience of Britain when it applied social welfare policies in the 20th century primarily. Did it help the political order? Did it increase political stability? So in Britain, the first reforms were introduced in 1911, similar to Germany, when social insurance was introduced at a limited level, but still, for the first time, social insurance was introduced. And initially, it led to more conflict and disorder. So, not less conflict, but more conflict. Almost all the sections related to these policies were unhappy. Employers and private insurance companies were obviously unhappy because employers had to pay more, and insurance companies thought that if state would provide insurance, then of course their business will go down or will suffer. Workers were skeptical. Unions were skeptical because they didn't think that the Prime Minister at that time, Lord George, is working for them. And unions had their own insurance policies, so they thought that this is one way of providing insurance. Government is trying to weaken the unions. Doctors, again, they thought that not that their business will increase because of these policies, but they thought that it's one way of the government to increase the regulation of medical profession. So while they are independent, they're in their own sphere, but by bringing social insurance, government will interfere in the medical practices. Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, was of course motivated in a way to steal the Labour vote. So Labour Party was gradually increasing its presence in the Parliament. Previously, there were only two parties, Conservative and that is the Tories and Liberals, and they alternated between them. The government alternated between them. But Labour was getting strong as we saw later on that it became the main party, and Liberals gradually became the third and a much smaller party, and never attained government after the 1920s and 30s. So that the motive was there, but of course there was maybe a smaller motive or but weaker motive, but Lloyd George did want to help low-paid workers, and we see later on that this insurance, which later on to more social welfare policies, helped increase social or political stability in Britain. Similarly, if we look at that, so there are three major reforms in Britain. We have seen it before in this course. So liberal reforms in 1906 to 14, and then labor welfare state creation in late 40s and early 50s, and then the social reforms by conservatives after 79. So both the first two reforms increased the social welfare and gave more and more benefits to the people, but the third one was the opposite one, when benefits were taken away and more restrictions were placed. So if we look at all three reforms, initially there was conflict, but later on, even in case of Mrs. Thatcher reforms, in which were benefits and social welfare policies were restricted, and less people were benefiting from them, and more mean testing was introduced and all these things. Even then, the conflict was not increased, didn't increase to that level that the political order of Britain was threatened. As Marxists, for example, dreamed of or thought would happen. So they think that Marxism basically argues that capitalism is on the way out, and social welfare policies can delay this eventuality, but it will happen. But if we see the experience of Britain and other advanced countries, they never had a Marxist revolution. Even when some of the social welfare policies were withdrawn, There was little bit agitation somewhere, there were strikes, and there was conflict, but it didn't threaten the political order to the extent that it collapsed. So the link between, again, we can see that the link between social welfare policies and social control and political order is there, but it's not that strong. Thank you.